Hey everyone, it's Blue Lizard Jello, and welcome back to Everything Possible in Dark Souls 1. Here I am in the Undead Parish, and we are about to kick off this episode, which will take us into the Duke's Archives. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk to Rhea, because we want to purchase some items from her, so we can actually fulfill her quest.
It is a great relief to see you. Now let us speak of miracles.
If you want to see the end of Rhea's quest, you need to pick up her Divine Blessing, and you need to buy every one of her miracles. Now, in case you are trying to collect all the spells, or at least all the miracles, something to keep in mind is that Great Heal, Wrath of Gods, and Magic Barrier can only be purchased from Rhea. You cannot get them anywhere else in the game. She does sell a regular talisman, however, in order to get her to move to her next location, you do not need to purchase that. But from here, let's go ahead and transition into Anor Londo, where we will actually begin our quest. And like with all other episodes, before we actually get underway, let's take a look at the equipment that we'll be using as well as our stats. I decided to use the server, specifically a Lightning server +5. If you recall when we picked it up, I did mention that we get 7 HP per hit every time we actually hit an enemy. I'm using the Sanctus at +10, which will give us 2 HP regeneration per second. I have equipped a normal talisman because I am going to be using both the heal and the force miracle. As far as fashion souls, I have the brass helm, embraced armor of favor, the paladin gauntlets, and the brass leggings. For my rings, as always, I'm using the covetous gold serpent ring, and I'm going to be using the ring of the evil eye so I can get that extra 30 HP regen per kill to stack along with my server and my sanctus. And here are the other rings that I will be swapping out at times during the run. And lastly, I do have 2 alluring skulls equipped, and you'll be seeing why in just a little bit. Here are the stats. Again, if you want to take a longer look, go ahead and pause the video. But I am now level 84, and all of those extra points went into Faith, because in order to use Sanctus effectively, I did need 18 Faith to wield it. We will also be needing higher Faith for another build that I'll be using later on in this series, so to begin leveling it up now is not a terrible idea. You can see that I was just at the bonfire where the Lady of the Darkling used to watch over, and even though she's dead, it is still a warpable bonfire. And by that, I don't mean that you can warp from it. Unfortunately, because it's not lit and you can no longer light it, there is nothing you can do while you're at that bonfire, but you do have the option to warp to that bonfire simply by selecting Anor Londo in the warp menu. Now, I did not show this path before we actually picked up the Lord Vessel, but now that we have the Lord Vessel and we've placed it below Firelink Shrine, we can now access this doorway right here, which will lead us into the Duke's Archives. And here we have our very first enemy, one that is familiar to us. Back in the Undead Burg, we saw one of these. This is an Armored Tusk, or a Fang Boar. And we're going to get him to charge at us, but we're going to run away so he actually loses aggro. And we're going to use the Alluring Skull so he's actually focused on the wall. Unlike the Armored Tusk or the Fang Boar that we saw in the Undead Parish, you can see that this one actually has a piece of armor over his backside, which means that we can no longer backstab. We were fortunate enough to pick up the Fang Boar helm. If this is a helm that you want to pick up, and it is actually one of my personal favorite pieces of armor because of how unique it is, you can only get one from one of the 3 non-respawning Fang Boars in the game. These 2 in the Duke's Archives, and the 1 in the Undead Parish. So especially before you take on these 2, if you're trying to get that helm, I highly recommend that you get your item discovery all the way up to 410 using 10 soft humanity and then either the Symbol of Avarice or the Covetous Gold Serpent Ring. And as you can see, once you have that maximum item discovery, they drop actually fairly commonly. And some of you may be wondering why I'm doing the Duke's Archives instead of Lost Izalith. At the end of the last episode, I had mentioned that Lost Izalith would be up next. However, in order to actually fulfill Sigmayr's quest, I had to actually do Duke's Archives before I actually encounter Sigmayr in Lost Izalith. Here we are in the true Duke's Archives, and we're encountering our first examples of the Undead Crystal Soldiers. Now, make no mistake, these Undead Crystal Soldiers will pack quite the punch. They are using crystal straight swords that actually do some really decent damage, not to mention there is a channeler in the other room that will actually buff all of these enemies, and they are capable of taking down your health very, very quickly. And here we get our first drop from them. This one dropped the Crystal Straight Sword. Now this Straight Sword cannot be upgraded at all. It does have some decent damage, however it has very low durability and it's not going to last you very long. Fortunately, with maximum item discovery, they can drop somewhat frequently. As for the possible drops, the Sword and Shield wielding Undead Crystal Soldiers can drop their Crystal Straight Sword as you've seen. They can also drop the Caduceus Kite Shield, which we will see an example of later, and the Undead Crystal Archers can drop a longbow. Now with these enemies out of the way, we're going to focus on this Blue Crystal Golem. And before you come here, you do want to go to Darkroot Basin and kill the Golden Crystal Golem that we did in a previous episode, so you can actually rescue Dusk, because if you do that, and you have the DLC purchased and installed, you will get the Broken Pendant. The Broken Pendant is the item that we need in order to actually access the Sanctuary Garden, which is the first stage of the DLC Artorias of the Abyss. If you own Dark Souls on the PC, you already own the DLC because it was packaged together. If you're playing on the Xbox 360 or PS3, you do have to purchase it separately and again have it installed. If you do not meet those requirements, the Blue Crystal Golem will spawn, but he will not drop the Broken Pendant for you. So if you have killed that golem and you didn't get the pendant, first you need to determine if you own and have the DLC installed, and then secondly, if you haven't already rescued Dusk in Darkroot Basin, you need to go back and do that. Don't worry, the golem will respawn and you can still get the Broken Pendant then. Underneath the stairs we can pick up a Soul of a Brave Warrior. And the next step is going to be taking out the channeler. I find it very easy to just two-hand my weapon and run in R1. And fortunately, our weapon is upgraded enough to actually take him out in one hit. And you can see he was just about ready to buff. And we don't want the Undead Crystal Soldiers getting that buff because, again, they become very, very dangerous. However, without the buff, the archers are, well, kind of terrible enemies. But before we continue on with the level, I want to show you a neat little Easter egg that some people had discovered in Dark Souls 2, but it actually can also be found in Dark Souls 1. And this book that I just was able to separate, this is actually a real-life book, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the real book on the left, as well as a copy of the book that can be found in Dark Souls 2. This book is called The Desire to Live, or at least that's the English translation. Le Désir de Vivre is my absolutely horrific attempt at actually saying it in French, but that is a real book, and it's apparently a very sad story about a girl who only wants to experience everything that life has to offer, but apparently things don't exactly go her way. But you can find this spread throughout Duke's Archives. You can also find it in Dark Souls 2, and a lot of people actually made the analogy that this seems to be very similar to Lucatiel's story in Dark Souls 2. So see if you can draw some lore implications for Dark Souls 1, because there aren't as many female NPCs that we can actually interact with at any great length. At the top of these stairs, if you turn left and then follow this hallway down, we do have a wooden chest. And taking a look at the chain, we know that it's not a mimic. And inside here we get one Twinkling Titanite. We will be picking up several of these in Duke's Archives and the subsequent area, the Crystal Cave. Now we're going to head back to the stairs. We're going to go to the opposite side because there is some more loot, including another chest. We have the two Undead Crystal Soldiers straight ahead, but if we turn left over towards this balcony, we can take out this one and take a look at the absolutely gorgeous dynamic sunshine that's actually streaming through the clouds. It is not static, which is something that I greatly appreciate. stop to admire the sun for just a moment because it is absolutely such a peaceful view. And of course we picked up that twinkling titanite. I just didn't want to interrupt the mood. But now let's get back to work. We have these 2 crystal soldiers to deal with. And now with this chest, let's take a quick look because we see the chain is sticking out, which means mimic. And then if we take a look at it face on, if you watch carefully and you wait patiently, there it is. You can actually see it breathing. So make sure you either use a Lloyd's Talisman or you attack this chest so you can actually get the contents inside safely. Or at least relatively safely. Because remember, they hurt. And they hurt a lot. However, if you can take them out, you are guaranteed to get a Crystal Knight Shield, but I was lucky enough to get the Symbol of Avarice. So we've talked about the Symbol of Avarice before. This functions as a helmet, and it'll drain 5 HP per second, but it also gives you plus 200 item discovery. Note that it does not stack with the Covetous Gold Serpent Ring, and it will also give you extra 20% soul absorption from enemies, and this does stack with the Covetous Silver Serpent Ring. The Crystal Knight Shield, this is simply a crystal version of the Knight Shield. It does give the shield increased damage if you actually want to use it for attacking, and it does give it higher stability. Keep in mind though, just like any other crystal upgrade, you cannot repair this item. You can somewhat repair it by actually upgrading it, which will reset the durability each time, but there is no true repair. Now on that elevator there is a tricky shortcut that you can take that will bypass a large part of the level as well as bypass a part that's coming up, which is the only time in Dark Souls 1 where you have a guaranteed death. In other words, there is no way to pass that part without dying. This is a Crystal General, and if you like the look of that crystalline armor set, we can pick that up later on. However, that will be in episode 2 of the Duke's Archives, because this is a very large area and I felt the need to split it instead of having an over hour long episode. With this Crystal Lizard, he will always run towards that wall and begin to disappear immediately, so let him run so he actually gets stuck, and then you can actually take him out with a good overhead swing, and for me, I was able to pick up a pair of Twinkling Titanite. So here we are at a boss encounter with Seath the Scaleless. He is a very pale dragon, he has no scales whatsoever, which means that he is somewhat of an imperfect dragon. Now something unique about this encounter is that you can actually turn around and you can leave the fog gate. You can actually leave this boss encounter, and the reason is, the developers, even though they might have put a cheap shot in by making it so that you had to die, they do give you the opportunity to prepare if you need to, which I think that was actually a really nice touch. You can see that I put on the rare Ring of Sacrifice, and the reason is, knowing full well that we're going to die, I would like to keep my humanity and I would like to keep my soul. But Seath's attacks also cause curse buildup, and if you die from curse and you're only wearing the Ring of Sacrifice, then you will still be cursed and your HP will be at half when you respawn. And when we wake up, we're in a completely different area than we were before. This is a brand new area to us. This is the Duke's Archive prison. And as soon as this rare Ring of Sacrifice Shattered message goes away, I can actually show you what's in it. There it is. So first you do spawn next to a bonfire that's unlit. Now even if you die in this area and you haven't sat at this bonfire, you will actually respawn here. So lighting it and resting at it is completely optional. But you can see that we can't get out here, but let's go check down here by this trio of undead crystal soldiers. Taking them out one at a time, if at all possible, because they can be very dangerous in groups. Yet another crystal straight sword there. I have no excuse for just how late that parry was. I also have no excuse for how bad this camera angle is. My apologies. But you can see just how common the crystal straight swords can be. Fortunately, I have my heal miracle, and I know I have Estus Flask, but I'm trying not to use them if I can avoid it. And you can see that this door is locked too. Now these doors actually take 2 different keys, and in order to get the very first key, we can see this sleeping man serpent who is actually watching over us. Well, he is close enough to the bars that you can actually kill him with just about any attack. And now we can pick up the Archive Tower cell key, which will let us out of this door to our right. And there is a cutscene that would play here, but I am cutting it out at the request of some of you. And you can now hear this terribly obnoxious siren playing. And this siren is doing a few things. It's alerting these man serpents to our presence, but it is also letting another enemy know that we're around, and it's actually driving them mad to the point where they will attack us. Now this man serpent was actually trying to get away, and if you let him get away, he will run up to the ladder that's at the top of these stairs, and he'll await you as you try to climb it up a bit later. There are a few cells that we can open along the way, however there is another key that is needed to open all of them. So we'll kill this undead crystal soldier, and now we have the Picasas. The Picasas are unique to Duke's Archives, and there's a reason they're unique to this area. And the reason is that Picasas were once human, most likely all female, and they are humans that were kidnapped by the Channelers, and they were brought to Duke's Archives so that Seath could perform experiments on them. It's actually a really sad story, and it's about to get sadder in just a bit, but they can drop humanity, and there are 2 unique Picasas that will drop miracles, and we'll see that once we get to the bottom of this area. You can see that previous cell was locked, but we are going to find the key here in just a bit. If you come inside this cell, and then you run to the end, there is a drop. You will take some fall damage, but not too much. And if you're lucky, you can get the drop attack on this soldier. Unfortunately, I missed by just a hair. But that's okay, because on this corpse in the corner, we get the Archive Prison extra key. And this will allow us to open up the rest of the cells, except for one very special cell, which we'll see at the bottom. We did get the Caduceus Kite Shield drop from this undead crystal soldier. And now a couple of Picasas that are patrolling outside. No worries, we can kill them fairly easily. And now before we continue on to the bottom, you can see there's a number of other Picasas down there. We can see the horn that's actually creating this siren. But before we go and deal with them directly, we're going to head back up to the top of the stairs. And we're going to do a bit more exploring before we get down there. And that other key that we picked up will open this door on the left, but we're going to save that for the end of this episode, because frankly, what we find in there is not going to leave us feeling very happy. So prepare yourselves. I hope I've warned you enough. I absolutely love the look of this helm, by the way. This blade that's on the back that was once worn by the Lady of the Darkling is just so... it's just so sharp looking, it's so regal. We cannot get through these doors yet, but if you take a look at these planks on the left... Now, in order to drop below, there is something you need to keep in mind. When you're dropping, you want to go straight to the planks that I'm looking at, not hug the right-hand side. If you hug the right-hand side when you drop, that ledge that we just passed will actually knock you out too far, and chances are you'll miss the ledge we just landed on and you'll die. And now we have the maiden set, the hood, the robe, the gloves, the skirt, as well as a white seance ring. The maiden set was worn by Traveling Maiden, kind of like Rhea of Thorolin, and is very likely that this belonged to one of the females that was brought here by the Channelers and turned into a Picasa. The White Seance Ring functions identically to the Dark Moon Seance Ring in that it gives you one free attunement slot. In fact, they do stack together, so if you're looking for a couple of attunement slots without actually putting anything into attunement, you can wear both the White and the Dark Moon Seance Ring for those 2 slots. But now that we have this extra key, we can go ahead and open this cell door. and walking carefully out and then walking over to the right, we can get this item that a lot of people don't actually know how to get to. Not that it's something all that great to pick up. It is just a soul of a brave warrior, but for me, it is more important to come this way for the area that it actually deposits you in, which is the area just above the siren creating horn. Now on this platform there are 2 man-serpents and there's a man-serpent mage. But if you make enough noise, you can actually get one or both of the man-serpents to actually leave the area, which will leave you with less of a threat when you actually drop down here. So now you can see we just have the 1 man-serpent and the mage, and had I successfully parried, I would have been down to just the mage. But now I've given the other man-serpent time to catch up, and now it's time to actually get the show on the road before I get trapped. So what I'll do is I'll run straight to the mage and get the backstab off, leave me with just the man-serpents to deal with. You see that I am playing a lot more defensively this time around because I'm trying not to use my Estus Flask if I can help it, so blocking and actually avoiding attacks is a lot more important to me this time around. Just one more man-serpent to deal with. 2 hits will stagger, a 3rd will kill him. Now we'll go ahead and heal, and now I'm going to turn off this bloody siren. And I want to take the time to actually point out what's on this siren because it is something I only just noticed when I was recording this. It's covered in draped snakeskin, or at least some sort of reptilian skin. It looks like snakeskin to me, and I just thought that was a really nice touch considering that siren was being watched over by man-serpents. And inside this chest we get the archive tower, giant door key, and we can hear crying below us. Can't quite see the source, so we're going to have to go down there and find out why we hear at least 1 woman crying, but it definitely sounds like 2 to me. Gliding down and heading into this room, we can see more Picasas, and they are placid this time. Now they will attack if you get too close, but now that the siren is actually off, they will stop prowling the area, and you can corral them here to make it a little bit easier to kill. We pick up humanity, but we still hear this crying. And if you listen carefully and you take a look, the crying are coming from these 2 Picasas. Now these 2 Picasas are unique in that they will not attack you. And when I say they won't attack you, I mean even if you start punching them, they will not do anything about it except try to get away. Maybe we're supposed to infer that these 2 Picasas are recent experiments from Seath, and that maybe they only just became Picasas, and they can still remember what it was like to be human. But we can put them out of their misery, and these 2 unique Picasas will each drop a miracle. We get Soothing Sunlight, as well as Bountiful Sunlight. Now the only way you can even use these miracles is if you're a member of the Princess's Guard, which you can join by talking to Guinevere and Anne Orlando. And the way these 2 works is that each one will actually work on increasing or restoring HP of yourself and of anyone in the area, be it summon, a host if you're actually summoned into another world, or you can actually increase the HP or regenerate the HP of enemies if you're an invader. And the difference between the 2 is that Soothing Sunlight actually functions more like a heal, and it will heal for 6 times whatever your talisman's magic adjust is, and Bountiful Sunlight is an HP regenerative effect.
Such a storehouse of knowledge.
With all the Picasas down, we can hear him blabbering on. We see Big Cat Logan has once again found himself behind bars, and we do not yet have the key to free him. So we are going to have to search the rest of the Duke's archives in order to find that key. Once we find it, we'll come back, we'll talk to him, get the item that we could see back in the corner of his cell, and then we'll continue on with his quest line a little bit further on in Duke's archives. And if you want to completely finish his quest line, you're going to need a lot of souls, so consider saving up, and you may even end up needing to use some boss souls, or you can always come back once you have the souls to spend. But finally, we'll come and use the extra key here on this cell, and inside, we have a lady dressed in the maiden set, and she's going to attack us with nothing but punches. Even though she does have a talisman on her, she will only use that talisman in order to heal herself. But if you're wondering who this is, well, just think back to the beginning of the episode when we purchased all of Rhea's items. We can pick up a large soul of a brave warrior if you want to, but if you just want to leave, I don't blame you. But you can see if we do attack her, she'll back up, and she'll actually heal herself almost to full. But this is Rhea of Thorland. Once you've actually rescued her and you purchase all of her items while she's in the Undead Parish, she will become hollowed and end up in the Duke's Archives. Now, I take this as a channeler has actually kidnapped her and brought her here so that she could be experimented on, and she became hollow in the process. But once you dispatch her, you can pick up 7 humanity, and you can pick up the Ivory Talisman. Now, the Ivory Talisman is not necessarily unique to Rhea, but it is unique to female clerics that are members of the Ways of White. If you read the item description, you'll find out that it was only given to females. However, even if you are a male character, you are not restricted in using it. You can use it to its full effect. The best usage of the Ivory Talisman is to use when your faith is at least at 43 or higher. Below those faith levels, there are other talismans that will have a better magic adjust. But now that we have the Tower Giant Door Key, we can open it up. And that is actually going to wrap up the first episode of Duke's Archives. So I really hope you guys learned something today, and if you did, please feel free to leave me that comment below. And if I've missed something or forgot something, please feel free to leave me that in the comments below. But I will catch you next time when we check out the rest of the Duke's Archives as well as the Crystal Caves.